The views expressed in this interview are those of the individuals and do not reflect the official policy or position of the U.S. government, the Department of Defense, the U.S. Navy, or the Naval Postgraduate School. Welcome to the Trident Room, brewer of stout conversation, unfiltered and on tap. On today's episode, Trident Room host Luke Gorsky sits down with Dr. Jeff Haferman.
So it goes through the whole training process. It understands the AII in some ways understands, and then it's a pretty simplified process, right? So looking out on kind of a similar example and how that would work for the DoD. I mean, you're talking about satellite remote sensing, and I can see some applications for that, as an Intel guy, when you're able to pretty rapidly try and identify things, just visually with, all the whatever satellites we have taking pictures of Earth. Is that
absolutely and
the type of thing?
That's another application, and that is very similar to what Google does with their AI in identifying images. If we have satellite imagery, and it may be something as simple as take an image from the last week and of a particular area, but the globe is huge, and if we're looking at whatever resolution data set, something very, very fine, we could use artificial intelligence to say, hey, the image that we had yesterday, it looks different today, and there's something of interest there. And it's gotten to the point where we have so much data that we can't have humans looking at that all the time. So computer needs to do that type of work. I want to give another example I thought of, and that is networking. So cybersecurity is huge. So we've got data coming into and out of our networks all the time. So there's something called network anomaly detection. So without and this gets a little bit sensitive, because there's always this ongoing battle between privacy versus you don't want hackers infiltrating your network. So we have something called network anomaly detection. So it's just, without really looking at the contents of the data, we can look at things like called metadata, and so when data is coming into it or out of, we can see if there's some kind of unusual activity happening in our network, and we can be alerted to that type of thing. So maybe we know, maybe we're seeing more packets coming from a particular source than we would normally expect. So, and maybe it's coming from a country that's an adversary, and we're seeing that type of packet. We want to be alerted to that and look into it. So we do have researchers that are doing that type of work, and that's also very, very data intensive. It's similar to the acoustic type of data. Instead of acoustic data, we're getting network data. So that's just another example that came to mind.
Yeah, so I think that, it's really interesting, and I think and maybe this will lead us into talking a little bit about the edge box that you all just received. Right. But so even if you have this 5,000 processing speed in one of the supercomputers here at NPS, and you've now refined your program, algorithm, whatever, to the point where it can not use all of that data or all of those 5,000 processors worth of resources, it still has to use some, right? So does that mean that there needs to be, to do like some of this network detection stuff, that you need some type of high computing power, like for example on a ship, to be able to monitor those ships' networks and look for those anomalies?
Yeah, so there's a number of different things that come to mind. One would be, if we're on what I'll call just sort of a remote platform, whether it's a ship or a sub or a plane or even a Humvee, call it forward deployed. There are applications where you would need a lot of processing power. Maybe you're you're receiving data. So I'll use an example. Let's say we're in a desert somewhere, and maybe we want to run a weather forecasting model, and we have sensors that are getting the wind speed, and they're getting all the environmental quantities, and we might want to run a weather forecasting model for whatever reason. Sometimes it could be to forecast a dust storm.
Right.
In some cases, it might be more advantageous to have your computing located where you're forward deployed rather than trying to send all that. Maybe you don't have good networking capability,
right.
So you can't get all that information back to a forecasting center. So if you're deployed, you have some sensors in the area, you could run your model right there, but that does require computing power. And you could do the same thing for if you're on a ship. Maybe you want to. A lot of time it is having sensors and getting that sensor data, putting it into a computer, and having that computing power right there.
I think it's going to be extremely important to have. I think that one of the big things that I've been reading about recently is just the massive amounts of data inflow for that, for Navy in particular, but I'm sure for all services have, and being able to parse through and understand what data is important, what data is not. And it's just more than the human mind can really do. So having that, the computing power on, and again, I'm a Navy guy, so we'll keep using ships, but having that computing power on the ship enables you to make those decisions there. And I think the other big advantage, because hey, why don't we just go and shoot this data to NPS and then they can fix it and shoot it back? Well, in a war, especially now that we're talking 21st century great power competition type things, your ability to send off or receive data on the ship is going to probably going to be very limited. So you have to have some of those organic capabilities in order to process all this information. So
absolutely.
And so that's kind of what the edge box, that's my understanding of what this edge box thing is kind of looking at. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so the edge box is a platform that we have here at NPS, made by a company called TMG Core, and NPS has engaged in what's called an LP CRADA. That's an acronym, but CRADA is a cooperative research and development agreement. The LP means limited purpose, but so that's just it's really so this was drawn up by attorneys, of course, because Navy JAG and TMG's attorney basically just formalize an agreement, but the nuts and bolts of it say, hey, TMG Core is going to provide this piece of hardware to us. We're going to evaluate it. We're going to look at it, and we're not going to damage it. So, so that's kind of our end of the agreement is, okay, let's use this thing and return it to them in one piece. And their end of the agreement is, we're going to let you use this piece of equipment. Now, what is the piece of equipment? It's a computing platform, and what makes it different than other computing platforms? Well, when we start talking about supercomputing, sometimes I think most people have had a laptop on their lap and have been doing a lot of work and feel the thing get warm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the more computing that you're doing, you're sucking up energy, and most of the energy that goes into a computer gets converted to heat. That's just how it is. So if we're doing lots of computing, we're plugged in using a lot of power. Most of that gets converted into heat. If you visit our data center sometime, or any data center, it'll be air conditioned, because you're just consuming thousands of watts of power. So I always like to tell people, our normal server consumes about, let's say, 2,000 watts.
Okay.
2,000 watts for just a single high-powered server. That's 20 100-watt light bulbs. So think of 20 incandescent bulbs. Think of 20
light bulbs just sitting
100
there.
watt incandescent light bulbs, because that's what these servers are doing. Most of that energy is getting converted to heat, and that's just a single server. We have got about 100 of those in a data center, so most of that's getting converted to heat. So you have to put additional energy into the cooling.
Right.
Okay, so what TMG Core has done is they've come up with a computing platform that is more efficient at cooling these computational servers than standard air conditioning.
Okay.
In our typical data center, you've got all the energy going to the computers, but you've got about another 40% on top of that. So if you've got, just for a server, a 2,000 watt server, you're going to use about another 500 watts of energy to cool that thing. All right. So TMG Core has come up with this computing platform. Others have tried to do similar things, but they're doing what's called immersion cooling. They're doing something called two-phase immersion cooling. So they've actually got the servers immersed in a fluid. It's in liquid. So when you look at it, and I'd like you to come over and I'll give you a tour sometime, but you'll just see these computing servers in a fluid, and you see the fluid bubbling, and it looks like it's in water. It's not in water. It's similar to more of like an oil, but if you dip your hand in this and pull it out, your hand comes out dry. It's just it's kind of an odd type of fluid, but it's much more efficient at cooling. In fact, their target is to get to about using an additional 3% rather than 40%.
Oh, wow.
So like I said, we have to use about 500 watts to cool a 2,000 watt server. So I'm trying to do the math in my head. They would want to use about 3%. So what does that work out to? Like 60 watts, I think, if I'm doing.
I'm just the
right.
poor poli-sci guy over here.
So it just they're using much less energy to do the cooling. So what does this mean for like deploying this type of resource? For us, we have to have an air-conditioned room. It's large. It uses a lot of energy. So what TMG Core is trying to do is make that more compact. So you don't have to have a big server room with big air conditioners. They're saying, okay, what we're going to do is put it in fluid, so you don't have to have a big room with air conditioners. The fluid will keep things cool. So that means you have less energy devoted to the cooling, and you have less space also. So that's one of the things they're doing. The other thing that they're trying to do is look at the shock and vibration. They're trying to put this in a platform that can be deployed on a mobile platform, so a ship, a plane, a Humvee, and can withstand that shock and vibration. So there's really two parts to it. It's like you're taking supercomputing and you're putting it into a smaller space that can be cooled, and it can be put in a platform that can handle those drops and
if you're on
bumps,
a destroyer in 10-foot seas, it's probably not great for most computers, especially filled with liquid already. So about how big is this platform? Is that the right word to use for it?
Yeah. So the viewer or the listeners they're not seeing the room we're in, but it's about the size of the room we're in now, which is probably 10 by 10 by 10 maybe.
Yeah. So like maybe like a walk-in freezer at a restaurant or something like that might be close to it.
Yeah, and they've got a number of sizes depending on how much computing power that you want. So I think their largest one is probably same height and width, but maybe double the length.
Okay.
So like a very very small trailer or something like that. So so this would be about the smallest size by 10 foot by 10 foot by 10 foot. And this is rough estimates. I've got their website has all the
Exact,
specs and so forth.
Maybe another visualization, kind of a cubicle, like walled up all the way around in an actual cube of a cubicle could be kind of close to that.
Yep. And the nice thing about it is when to set one of these things up, there's really maybe 4 pieces. Well, 4 things that you need to do. You need to sort of assemble it, take the servers and just put kind of the rack and stack. We did this with the help of TMG Core, really in a day.
Okay.
An 8 to 5 day. Wheeled everything in, set it up, pour the fluid in, and then once that's done, it's basically plug the power in, and then plug the networking in. And so if you were on a ship or deploying this anywhere, you wouldn't necessarily need the networking part. The networking, if you have a satellite downlink, you might be able to do the networking, but you may not need the networking. You really just need the compute, which means you need the power. So the power could come, here we have a luxury, we could plug it in, but TMG Core did their first work with NPS. They did down at Camp Roberts on the back of a truck, and I think they just plugged it into some generators.
Okay.
So however you can get power to these things, yeah.
So then what's the processing power of one of these units compared? Like, let's just go with the smallest one as we try to keep it a little bit more deployable.
So we've got the smallest one that they make here, and we've got so they gave us 3 servers inside the unit. 2 of the servers have CPUs only, and each server has 96 cores. So there's server A with 96 cores, server B with 96 cores. So compare that again. I always like to go back to laptops. People that are working with laptops, typically you'll have 2 cores or 4 cores, dual core, quad core. So we have a server with 96, another server with 96, and then there's a third server that has 46 CPU cores, but it also has 4 GPUs. So have you heard about GPUs?
It's essentially like a video card.
It's
kind of for your computer,
exactly.
right?
That's exactly what it is. So I always turn to the kids for these. I've got a young son, so he knows more about the gaming side of things than I do, but he knows what all the high-end video cards are, and these are very, very high-end video cards made by NVIDIA, and the GPUs that NVIDIA makes for these types of supercomputers, even though they're called GPUs, graphical processing units, there are no video ports on them. They're used purely for computing because they're very, very good at certain types of computation. So this has 4 very, very high-end NVIDIA graphics cards. They're meant for data center use. Usually they're meant for artificial intelligence types of applications. So we've got one server that has 48 cores of GPUs and then 4 very high-end NVIDIA GPUs for, again, normally they're used for artificial intelligence applications. There are other things they can be used for, but that's where, like I think I said in this conversation, I need to know a little bit about a lot of different fields. We have professors, students, researchers, staff here at NPS that are experts that really know how to, for example, they will say, I know how to use this GPU to do this particular application, and they're an expert at it. They're really, really good. So we just kind of make this stuff available, get it up and running, and then we leave it to our researchers to go on and take advantage of this stuff.
So as you guys have kind of these more deployable, this EdgeBox system here, and you're experimenting with it and using it, is one of the things that some of the professors, researchers are looking at is how to, maybe refine the programs and stuff from those large supercomputers that we have there so that you can actually use them on these smaller things? So are they placing research constraints on their, or resource constraints on their own research in order to achieve that?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I'll think of one of the models that we're running on the EdgeBox is a weather forecasting model, and it's actually being developed in the math department here. It's not being developed in. I mean, the meteorology department, they're doing a lot of work in forecasting, but our mathematics department is doing some really interesting stuff on weather forecasting models, and they're looking at what I will call cutting edge, state of the art weather forecasting. They're trying to do exactly what you're talking about. If they have a large supercomputer available, they'll try to use those resources. But if they have something smaller available, they're trying to get their model to, the word is scale. They're trying to get it scaled so that it will run on whatever resources you provide to it. So they're absolutely looking at that stuff.
So we talked a lot about the weather modeling and the oceanographic stuff. You maybe give me another one or two examples of some of the other projects that people have got going on here with either the Edge in particular or some of the other larger supercomputers?
Yeah, so I talked about the networking, network detection, network anomalies. One of the some of the other things. And we haven't looked at this on the EdgeBox yet, but an application that we've done here at NPS, and I want to bring it up because it's also a buzzword you'll hear about, big data. I think people have heard that term thrown around. What the heck is big data? But this is really it's something that we are doing at NPS and will likely look at doing on the EdgeBox. But it's to use a cliche, it's the pulling a needle out of a haystack sort of thing. So, it comes from really, I'll say Google, but any of these search engines where you've got tons and tons of data. So in Google's case, it was like, well, we're going to take all the data that's on the internet and we're going to do internet search. That's what Google became famous for, search engines. So you've got tons of data. How do I pull something interesting out of it very, very quickly? What Google did is really they just indexed the entire internet. They just combed through all of that data, and every time, for example, a word appeared, so it could have been HPC. Okay, HPC, it occurs all these. They basically created a big phone book so that when you put in your search, that's how it comes back so quickly. They've processed this data already, and every time something's added to the internet, they have to recreate their phone book over, and this is done every millisecond. So we have the same type of thing that we have researchers doing here, but on DoD, what I'll say DoD-centric types of data sets. So Google has the entire internet available to them. We have different types of data sets that are available to us. So, for example, you mentioned the remote sensing thing. Maybe we've got visible imagery, and with using big data techniques, we can go out and we can classify images. So, and this will require enormous computing power, but then once the processing is done, you could just say, like, show me all images that might have a picture of a yellow bus in them or something like that. And
You can just pull them up.
You could just pull it up. So you can let your imagination run wild on types of things that you could do with that. One other thing I thought of is, this goes back several years ago, but we NPS, we got a large data set from Twitter. And this is just used for teaching. But and it gets scrubbed, so it's anonymized, so it doesn't have your name on it. But we get tweets. We've got all these tweets that came from Twitter. We've got like 50 terabytes worth of tweets, and it's used in a couple of the classes here for teaching purposes. So here you go, students. Here's 50 terabytes of data. See what you can do with it.
Figure out how to index it or whatever we need to do so that we can quickly access all this information. Yeah, I think I can 100% see, a lot of applications for that underway. I mean, the kind of example that immediately came to my mind, again, going to kind of the electromagnetic spectrum, is, just being able, we have tons of sensors on our ships just sucking up all the electrons in the air. So being able to, at any time being like, oh, I want to look for this specific signal within that, and being able to pull it up rapidly to rapidly identify it, I think really would be extremely useful. And I know we have some of that capability now, but again, as artificial intelligence plays a larger role and just decision-making processes get sped up, it's really going to make a big difference being able to have that extra, even a couple milliseconds, seconds, could be a big difference for the warfighter in the end, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the really sort of rewarding things about my job when I come in to work each day, and I get to work with talented people all across campus. But NPS mission is focused on educating students. So students come through here, and they have these resources available, and we've got our faculty who teach these courses, and then a lot of times it's up to the students. You've been on a ship, you've got experience being deployed. A lot of times it's just students sitting in a class, kind of brainstorming just the way you are, thinking, wow, it'd really be cool if I could apply this technology to this problem. And a lot of times that's where these thesis topics come from. And I just know over the years, I just see a lot of really fascinating research and thesis work done by students they've gone through a course, gotten educated, and come up with an idea for an application, and that turns into their thesis. And I guess the analogy is some of this stuff that you see being done, whether it's, call it like the big computer companies, the Apples, the Googles, the Facebooks, Twitter, etc. A lot of the things that they're doing, we're doing similar things here, but the end application is it's very, very different, but it's the same type of technology. So it's just a lot of really good minds here, and people coming up with really good ideas on how to apply these things to DoD.
No, definitely. And I think that was one of my biggest takeaways. Coming to NPS, I was a little bit jaded about education in general. I'm not always the biggest fan of school, but kind of coming here and seeing that, the professors and researchers here aren't in an ivory tower sitting and, figuring out whatever problem they think is interesting. There's a ton of student collaboration and understanding these are the problems in the fleet or, the Army or the Air Force, wherever it is. And, we have all this knowledge, and you said knowledge and tools that the students can then leverage to solve these problems. And I think it's been extremely valuable, and it was really eye-opening to me, and really, I think, a positive trend to see how engaging both the students and the faculty here are in looking to solve, tomorrow's problems for students today.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, sir. I really appreciate it, and definitely take you up on the offer to go see the Edge box and everything else over there. So.
Absolutely. All right. You're welcome.
Thanks for joining us in the Trident Room. For more information about today's guests and topics, please visit the show notes. The Trident Room has been brought to you by the Naval Postgraduate School, Alumni Association and Foundation. For questions, comments, and suggestions, please email us at tridentroompodcasthost@nps.edu and find us online at nps.edu/Trident Room